Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 10 of the Corcoran Cap, finally in the double digits podcast. We're talking A's, Warriors, Niners, and college basketball. We're starting off with the A's, a bit of a special edition for the A's. This is going to be an over 15-minute segment. We have a lot to talk about. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran. To my right is Jake. We got a busy week coming up, Jake. We had a busy week behind us. How you feeling about all this?
I'm just excited at this point. I know the A's aren't in a prime playoff push, but I can't wait for the season. I got my Bad News Bears jersey on. I got a movie marathon of baseball ready this week. I'm ready to go.
Yes, sir. But before we were ready to go, we did make one big move, and that was obviously the Sean Manaea trade to the San Diego Padres, a very last-minute deal. We got two prospects in return. Why am I forgetting their names? One is like a 19-year-old infielder. We talked about this last night. I remember. If I pull up
his last name.
Yeah, Angeles. They seem like really good. I'll let you talk about them real quick. Let me pull up their names and their stats.
Yeah,
I always forget.
He's like kind of a hybrid guy, second, short, third. And what I find really interesting is he's 19, and on MLB.com his ETA is next year. And he's hit nothing but like 300, 320 in the minors up to this point. I mean, the A's haven't had a guy come up when he's 20 years old since I've been watching A's baseball. So that's pretty exciting. He seems like a guy who could actually be like a legitimate top prospect. From what I've read, the MLB.com and the ESPN like prospect rating things are pretty like pessimistic on him compared to actual scouts. Like I think it was Heyman who tweeted like Padres had more to give, but the A's were like in love with this guy. So
this guy he's an A+ ball right now, 19 years old. If I look at his stats, he was born. Yeah, he is a year older than us, Jake, which is kind of crazy. In single A last year, he was in A ball and then A+ ball. In A ball, he hit 343, then got promoted, hit 264 in A+ ball. He appeared in 18 games in A+ ball. He did pretty well. I mean, the majority of his season was in A ball, which he absolutely killed it in. But yeah, now he's heading over to Lansing, our A+ affiliate. And overall, I mean, he's already our 11th best prospect. He's projected to come up in 2023. It could be a very good signing for us. Another guy right ahead of him, Brian Buelvis, also a 2023 guy, 19 years old. The A's have really bolstered their farm system. I know we didn't get him this offseason, but I mean, the A's have really bolstered their farm system lately. And I think, despite it being rough that we're losing a lot of these guys that have been key pieces to this team so far, I think this team is committed to the future. They didn't really see a way where they can win the division. You also could blame like ownership, whatever you want to do. But this team is committed to the future, and I think I'll be for it at the end of the day. I think a lot of these guys can come up, make a serious impact for our team, and it'll work out. The other guy was he is Adrian Martinez, our 25th best prospect. He is currently in AAA, should come up this year. He is 25 years old, which might concern a lot of teams. He was in AA, then came up to AAA, went 1-2 with a 5.28 ERA, but did very well in AA right there. 9 games. 9 games. He started all of them. 44 innings pitched. It wasn't the best. It wasn't honestly the best for him. 1.51 whip, not really what you're looking for, but I think he can develop a little bit in AAA, maybe come up towards the end of the year, and we get another solid piece to our rotation.
Yeah, this is, despite his age being 25, this is a guy who I don't think we're going to see in the majors this season, at least in a starting capacity. Maybe if he really excels and we need an extra bullpen piece, we might be able to see him. But, I mean, really his thing is he had Tommy John, so he missed, I believe, the 2016 or 2017 whole season, and then he missed the entire 2020 season from the pandemic. So even though he has, 25, so he has like 6 years technically in the minor league system, he hasn't really been able to play all those. It's been more like 3.5. So he is still somewhat developing, and he needs to get his feet wet in AAA maybe for the whole season before we can see him actually make a potential impact.
He won't be coming up to start the year. It's like, that's all I'll say about him. But yeah, I definitely think you look at the prospects, and this team definitely got a lot younger at prospects. I know you have Langeliers could be up this year. Christian Pache is obviously coming up. Those are guys we got in the deal with the Atlanta Braves. There's a ton of other guys. Gunnar Hoglund, we got in the, I believe, the Matt Chapman deal it was. JT Ginn with Chris Bassett. There's a ton of, a lot of our guys in the top 10 are guys who you should see making an impact in a few years, and they're going to come from these trades. And I know it sucks in the meantime, but the A's know, Billy Beane, Dave Force, they know, I think it's Dave Force. Yeah, they know what they're doing. So yeah, it works out. It works out well for the A's in the end, usually.
Yeah. It's hard to deal with, but I'm excited about some of the guys we got coming up. So
definitely. And speaking of the guys that are going to come up, we're going to see a lot of these guys this year. And Jake and I thought it would be a good idea to go through the depth chart of this team and just break down each position. And I think we should just start with the position players and move on to pitching last, because I think there's a lot we can talk about pitching. So let's just start. We can just go kind of position by position really quickly. I think catcher could be one of our deepest positions. Sean Murphy will be starting. Austin Allen is a solid catcher, backup catcher. If you need a guy to really come in and you need an emergency catcher, you can go Stephen Vogt. And then the minors, your number 1 and 2 prospect are both catchers. Your number 2 guy should be coming up this year, Shea Langeliers. It's going to be interesting to see what the A's are going to do with the catcher situation come the deadline. Will Langeliers come up? Will Langeliers even be a catcher? Or will they move Sean Murphy somewhere else? I don't really know. I think you could see Sean Murphy be gone at the deadline if they want to move on with Shea Langeliers, especially when you have Tyler Soderstrom right behind him. So I think one of these guys could get moved depending on how this team is performing. If Sean Murphy's playing out of his mind and the team's doing well, maybe you move Langeliers to get another guy on this team who can be there, maybe even for the long term. I don't really know. But I think this catcher room, there's a lot of potential with that. I think this will not be the catcher room come the end of the year. You're going to see some movement around. Maybe you can fill up get a prospect in a position that you need. And we'll talk about some of those guys later. But overall, I think this catcher room is very solid, and I think it's going to move around a little bit.
Yeah, well, for starting it off, obviously this doesn't impact the catching this year, but Soderstrom, from what I've heard, all indications is that he's not a catcher. He's a guy he's got a really
he's mainly used for his bat.
He's developing at third in the outfield, maybe first base, and obviously there's the DH spot, but he is a great hitter. And then, like I've said in a couple past episodes, Sean Murphy, if he has a good season, he's probably not staying with us. He's got 3 or 4 years left on his deal, and the A's they don't retain really good players in their ARB2 and ARB3 seasons where we actually have to pay them. So I could easily see him getting shipped off for a haul if he comes back, and because he won a Gold Glove last year, right?
Yeah, he won a Gold Glove last year. One of the best catchers in the American League.
Yeah, so if he comes and starts hitting 260 and has a 780, 800 OPS, that's a really valuable guy. Especially he's only 20. He'll be 27 this year. That's could land us a few top prospects, and that's someone that I would be excited if they start doing well this year, just because the potential return and knowing that we have Langeliers and Allen in the pipeline.
Absolutely. I definitely think Sean Murphy could be a deadline target, but I think he's going to be a great catcher to start the season. The A's are going to do everything they can to get his value up, especially in a year where you might not do that well. So I think that's a good position to watch. Let's move on to first base. And I think it's an interesting position. This is one of the positions where it's a really big question mark. I know it says on the depth chart that Eric Thames is our starting first baseman, but he is going to start the year at AAA. So that was interesting for me. I think you'll probably see Stephen Vogt be in that role, I guess. There's another guy, Billy McKinney, I've never really heard of.
Billy McKinney is do you remember the trade when we got Jason Hamill and Jeff Samardzija from the Cubs?
Yes, was he involved in that deal?
6 years ago. We traded him.
Yeah, so he was a first-round pick.
He was our first-round pick. So
interesting.
That's the only reason that I know the name, but
so he has played last year. Wow, last year he was on 3 separate teams. He was with the Brewers, Mets, and Dodgers. His profile pic is him in a Rangers hat. So he's bounced around the league a lot. last year, I mean, last year he did okay. 255 career average. You could see him start, I guess. I really don't know. I think I'd have a lot more confidence in Stephen Vogt starting. I think he's a more proven player. You'll probably see him there, but Eric Thames could be a guy that comes up and does really well for us towards the end of the year. Also, I mean, first base is a position where you can put a lot of guys there that if you really need a position, like let's say Langeliers is ready to come up and you want to start him and Sean Murphy, you can probably put one of those guys at first base just to get a bat in there.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at first base, I think that our everyday starter, honestly, will be Seth Brown. Just because I've seen him play the position. He hits with pop, solid lefty. We're going to want his bat in the lineup every day. And looking at the outfield, it's a little more clogged up in terms of playing time than first base is. We don't really have a definitive guy. So I think you're going to see, like you said, Lowry's going to get some ABs potentially at first. Maybe I'm wrong, but I saw him walking around in some photos with the first baseman's mitt. And then you've got Thames in AAA. Vogt, obviously, you're going to see a bit. And then I don't even know, is Billy McKinney on the roster?
I mean, he's on our depth chart. If I look at I'm looking at this active roster right now. Because it's weird how they do it. They have a depth chart, they have an active roster, and they have a 40-man roster. In looking at that, he is not on this active roster. Neither is a guy neither is Eric Thames. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. So they only have 5 infielders listed, 5 outfielders listed. So, I guess he's not.
You're looking at pretty thin at first base. Maybe that's why I only say that I think Seth Brown, because I don't think that Stephen Vogt can play every day or even every other day. So
that's fair.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. So Seth Brown's definitely a sneaky name to keep an eye on. So I think you could definitely, I think it could be a good fit for him if you especially want to get him in the lineup with a deep outfield. I think it could really work out. Let's move on to second base. And this is where I think you're going to see Tony Kemp play a lot. I think Tony Kemp should be the everyday starter. I know on the depth chart he's a bit down, but he should, in my opinion, he is a better second baseman than Jed Lowry. He should be getting the starts. If you're going up against a left-handed pitcher, maybe you start Jed Lowry because Lowry can hit switch, and Tony Kemp's just a left-handed batter. But overall, I think Tony Kemp is one of our best players on this team. Very versatile. I think second base could be a fantastic fit for him.
Yeah, sorry, backtracking a little bit. I completely forgot. Austin Allen can also play first base, so that's a little
true. There's a lot of guys that can play first base, and that's a key theme you've seen. I think we were talking about this. There's a key, versatility is something that this team has a lot.
Yeah, and then second, I do agree. I think Kemp will play probably every other day with other guys getting worked in, because I know when Noisy was on the A's last time, he actually played second for the majority of the time, obviously because we had Chapman, but that he can still play there. Lowry, obviously. Kevin Smith is also a guy. And then when we call up Nick Allen. Nick Allen should be able to come up this year, be a shortstop, Elvis or second baseman. But he's a really good defender. So, I mean, we got a lot of old guys at second base, so it's not going to be anyone who's getting 600 at bats and only playing second and clogging it up the whole day like you could see at other positions.
100%. And speaking of Elvis Andrus that you just talked about, that is who the starting shortstop will probably be this year. And I think that also could change. Elvis Andrus obviously really struggled last year with the A's. He's starting to reach the twilight of his career. He's a lot younger than most people expect. He's like 34. It feels like he's been in the league for so much longer. But I mean, he was on that 2010 team that went to the World Series, and he's still. It's kind of crazy. Like, you thought, like, oh, he'll be out of the league by the end of the decade. No, he's only 34 years old. But Nick Allen could also very much come in and make an impact there. Even it's not Max Muncy's not coming up yet, right? No way.
He's far off.
Yeah, he's way far out. They're projecting 2024 for him.
Yeah, at shortstop, again, I think I said this maybe 2 episodes ago, but Elvis Andrus has a player option for next year. So I don't know what I meant to look it up, but I don't know what the deal with that. And if it is that we cut him and then the option gets waived, you could see that happen, just because we're not going to want to pay him $15 million. Maybe there's some sort of buyout there, but If not, then Andrus I would expect to play every day. I mean, he played every day last year at short. Maybe you see Nick Allen come up for a bit and Kevin Smith take a few innings away, but nothing much.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see too much of that. But yeah, overall, I definitely think you'll probably see Nick Allen, Elvis Andrus right there. Depending on what happens, I think you'll see that. And now we move on to probably the weakest position on this team, third base. And it's like the only guy that we really have that can play third base is Sheldon Noisy. I mean, I don't know much about Kevin Smith. Is Kevin Smith a third baseman? No.
Yeah, he plays.
Is? Okay.
He's one of those utility guys. He plays second, short, and third.
Okay.
So,
you'll probably see Noisy though. I think more probably, right?
I think Noisy. And then if Pinder's bat is always valuable in the lineup, so you can see we've seen him play a solid third base, especially if Noisy begins to struggle. We could shuffle around that outfield if we want to call up. I mean, some of our prospects are outfielders as well, so you could see if we call up like Luis Barrera and then Pinder gets shifted down to third base. But I mean,
yeah, it's a deep outfield too
with all his positions. Yeah,
definitely. And like speaking of the outfield, it is a very I think the outfield is like where you have the depth and you have a ton of versatility because right now you have Christian Pache, Chad Pinder, Steven Piscotty, Seth Brown, who could be at first base, Sky Bolt. I mean, you and I have thoughts on Sky Bolt that, yeah, oh boy. And Ramon Laureano too will be back after a month or two. So
yeah, I always have to keep reminding myself that.
Yeah, Ramon Laureano will be back. So that's another thing. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think to start the year, you're probably looking at Pache in center, Piscotty in right, and Pinder in left. And like looking at our prospects, I don't think there's really that many guys who are probably going to come back. Who could come up
Cody
right
Thomas,
there.
I really don't know who that is. I'm going to be 100% honest.
I don't know who that is.
I started seeing him in the box score in spring training, and they said he can play first as well. So that could lead to him being called up. And then Barrera, I remember Barrera last year. He was like a super athletic looking guy, but like he just did not. I mean, he only had like 10 at bats or so, but he looked kind of lost at the plate.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just looking through Kevin Smith as well because I just saw him on the prospect list too. So was he in the Chapman trade? Looks like he was based on his stats.
He was Toronto.
He was Toronto, so he was in the Chapman trade. 285 in Buffalo last year. That was his average. Overall, I mean, you could see him be interchangeable with Sheldon Noisy. I think Noisy is obviously a bit more proven, which is why I think you'll probably get a bit more of him to start the year, but that obviously could change. And I think, yeah, again, versatility is a big thing here because you have Kevin Smith, shortstop, third baseman. You have, and second baseman for that matter too. Seth Brown can really play everywhere. Chad Pinder can play everywhere. You can put Pache, Piscotty anywhere you want in the outfield. So overall, I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of movement around, and what we're saying right now may not even be true.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. We don't have a crystal ball. I just pulled up Luis Barrera's stats, but he's definitely a guy who's going to get called up. He's been hitting 300 in the minor leagues for like 5 years now, but it just never made the transition.
Yes.
So yeah, look at him, and then but that's about it. We're pretty thin almost everywhere, considering that we have 13 hitters on our roster, but a lot of them are veteran guys like Vogt, Kemp, Lowry. Like you're not going to see these guys every day in the lineup for sure. And then you've got guys like Sky Bolt we talked about, and Kevin Smith and Austin Allen, who are just, again, I could be proven wrong, but they're just not that good. In my
exactly.
opinion. They're not going to get, they're maybe 200 AB guys this year if they stay up the whole season.
100%. Yeah, definitely. You're going to see a lot more young guys play. I mean, it's a team you're building for the future here. So I think you're going to see a lot of young guys come up, get reps. You're going to see a lot of movement. And honestly, like none of this could be true. Hell, you could even see like Steven Piscotty be a catcher. I mean, I don't know. That's just I'm reaching there, obviously, but whatever. It doesn't matter. And now let's move on to the pitching. We've talked about the position players. I'm looking at the depth chart right now. It looks like we right now we probably have a 4 or 5 man rotation. The rotation it says listed is Montes, Cole Irvin, Dalton Jeffries, Brent Honeywell, and you probably want to add another guy to that rotation. Could be Adam Aller, could be do you think Puck would be able to make the rotation, Jake?
The rotation that I have listed is, I think, Montes 100% our ace with Irvin locked in behind him. And then I have, obviously, Kaprelian when he comes
back. He's not on the depth chart, but I just saw him in the thing. I meant to bring him up.
He's injured right now.
He is. That's true. I remember when we saw him, Jake. I feel like I went to multiple games with you last time. He killed everyone.
He's awesome. I love him.
I like Kaprelian.
I think as far as the guys, I don't know, Brent Honeywell, you could see in that fifth role, but right now, I have Montes, Irvin, Paul Blackburn, I think is definitely going to start in the rotation. Dalton Jeffries, Cal guy, local. So I kind of like him to start the rotation. And then it's kind of a toss-up between Puck and Honeywell. I just don't know if Puck's arm can handle it. He might be a bullpen arm.
He might be, yeah. And also, Paul Blackburn is a Bay Area guy from the Bay Area. It's nice to see guys getting that rotation. And then you have the bullpen. I think bullpen's a bit interesting. Right now you have Lou Trevino as your closer. And other than that, like it's really interesting to see Kirby, like what's it going to look like? Kirby Sneed, AJ Puck are two solid lefties. I definitely think should be getting some good play time this year. Even a guy, I mean, you have Domingo Acevedo, 6'7" guy, right-hander. That's a good setup guy, I think. Yeah, he's been playing well from what I've heard too. It's definitely an interesting bullpen. There's not many names you recognize in this bullpen, but the A's usually always know how to get their bullpen going. Like I feel like I've never been too worried about the A's bullpen. Besides last year, maybe. Last year was a bit rough, but other than that, it was like
what this bullpen screams to me is that they're getting guys in there who, because I mean, there's not a lot of young guys in this bullpen at all. It's all 27, 28 plus. And it tells me that they're looking for guys who are going to compete for half a season on the A's, put up some good stats, and then we can flip them for a nice little prospect. I mean, especially Lou Trevino, I don't think there's any way, unless he completely implodes, I don't think there's any way he ends the season on the A's. This is his last or second to last season on his contract anyway. So
yeah, he will probably be gone by the deadline. I was assuming they'll give him that closer role. They'll get some value for him. Usually closers, a lot of teams are looking for closers, especially ones in playoffs, because not every team has a bullpen. So they are very valuable in the trade market.
Yeah, and then like especially guys, like you said, Acevedo or Diolis Guerra, if they happen to have a really good season randomly, that's what we're looking for. We're just looking for some guy to post a 2.3 ERA, kind of fluky through 20 games and flip them away. In terms of long-term guys, I mean, Kirby Sneed, Adam Aller, they're like 27, I think, both of them, and they're under contract long-term because they've never played in the majors. But other than that, there's not much that's going to stick around for a while. Obviously, if Puck gets added to the bullpen, I'd love to see him excel just because, I mean, he has so much potential and he was our top prospect for so long.
Exactly.
But, I mean, Sam Maul and like some of these guys don't really excite me. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you've never really heard of a lot of these guys before. Like 5'9", 190, that's like my size. It's like, come on. But anyways, let's move on to a little segment. I know we just went through a ton of players. Jake, I want you to give me 3 players who you think have the best chance to break out this year.
Yeah, I picked some good players. I think I'm really excited to see Seth Brown get 500-600 at bats, which I think he definitely will get with this team this year as long as he stays healthy. Knock on wood. I always really liked the guy. He kind of reminded me when he came up of do you remember Nick Martini?
Yes, I do.
Came up and it was like the second half of the year he just torched pitchers and he looked great. And then whatever guys came back from injury or we traded for guys at the deadline, and then the next season they kind of didn't really get their ABs, and Nick Martini ended up getting traded to the Padres. But I'm excited for Seth Brown to get his licks. He's a pretty big power hitter. So if he can be a guy who can end up hitting for like 250, he could be pretty special. And he's also, obviously, he can play a bunch of different outfield positions. He can play first base. Could see him in the DH role a little bit. So I really like Seth Brown this year, and I think he's probably our cleanup hitter or 3-hitter even to start off the year.
Yeah, I definitely put him down as one of my guys, and you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. That was I mean, he's going to be a versatile guy. You're going to see him in the top half of the lineup. I think and usually you wouldn't see this on many teams, but the A's have given Seth Brown an opportunity to excel. He did very well last year. You know, that whole brownie points thing. Everyone was kind of on board with that, and now he's in a great position to excel. I mean, we talked about first base, outfield. We talked about a ton of positions for him, and I definitely think you could see him in a great position to succeed this year. I'm going to move on to the pitching staff right now for my second guy, and then I'll toss it back to you. Let's talk about Dalton Jeffries. I think last year he struggled a little bit. Did I take him from you too?
Yep.
Dalton. So our minds are kind of reading alike. Exactly. Dalton Jeffries, I mean, right-handed pitcher. He kind of struggled last year, but currently in our prospect pool, he is the 14th best prospect, 26 years old. I mean, last year, yeah, you didn't see in AAA. He pitched 491, but before then he was good. Obviously, he did play some with Oakland. He pitched 360 last year in 5 games. One of those games he started. He should be in the starting rotation this year. I'm very excited to see what he can do. Probably as a number 2 or 3 guy. Definitely no higher. Definitely no lower than 3. If Kaprelian's not playing in the meantime, but overall, I mean, he had the start last year. I forget who was against, but I remember it being a very good start, and I am very excited to see what he can do this year. Could be moving up. Montes, when he came up to the A's, wasn't really that high up. Now he moved up the depth chart now to our number 1 starter. Came out of nowhere. I think Dalton Jeffries could do the same.
Yeah, since you took Dalton Jeffries, I'll bring up another guy who we slightly mentioned earlier. Brent Honeywell Jr. He's a guy we got from the Rays for practically nothing. I think it was cash considerations even.
Yeah, it was nothing.
He was a top prospect for the Rays for a while, and he's still only 26. Like, I know that's a little past his prime, but for the A's, we don't call up prospects much before that anyway. So I think, he's been pretty good throughout the minors. He's just struggled at the majors, and he's had a horrible spring training. So we'll see if he even makes the starting rotation out of camp. But if he can get in a groove, he's a guy who could have big upside for not much that we put down. To be honest, I've never seen him pitch. He's only had a couple appearances in the majors with the Rays last year. I think he was mostly in that like opener role where he would pitch 1 or 2 innings and then give it to the pen. But
Bob Melvin did that in the past with us, and now you're moving on to what we called the so-called cheaper Bob Melvin. You could see some of that.
His protege. Yeah. So I'm excited about Brent Honeywell.
Yeah, Brent Honeywell's another good guy, I think, to look at. And one guy, I want to talk about another guy who Jake and I texted. I mean, we kind of texted about him the other day. Had a great spring training, really kind of came out of nowhere last year for the Mets. Adam Aller probably will be a bullpen guy, but especially if Trevino, he also could start. We'll see what happens. I don't really know his history. If I pull up his stats real quick,
they announced he has been a starter in the past, but they already announced that he's coming out of the pen.
Exactly. Yeah. 20. Yeah. He will probably be coming out of the pen this year from Northwestern State University, 20th round pick. I mean, it's a great story, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. Yes, he's 27. You kind of mentioned it with Honeywell about the age. I mean, the A's, they're just looking for guys, and I think Adam Aller last year had a phenomenal season in Syracuse with the Mets, I believe it is where he was. Now you bring him into Oakland. I think he can be a pretty good piece of the bullpen. If Trevino's gone, I definitely think you could see him take that closer role, especially if he's working his way up. Could take a while, but overall, I think he's ready for the MLB as the A's called him up. I mean, this is a former Home Depot employee, which is kind of crazy. Now he's going to be pitching for the Oakland Athletics. So I'm very excited to see what he can do this year. I definitely think he can make a big impact.
Yeah, and that brings me to my last guy, going back in positions. We talked about him, and a lot of the guys who I think could bring the biggest impact are guys who are young, but I know are going to get a lot of at-bats. And this other guy is Sheldon Noisy, and I think that he could be good. I remember him coming up for the A's, and he didn't get, I think he got 20 or 30 ABs a few years ago, and he kind of reminded me of, do you remember Ryan Healy?
Yes, I do.
Had a really good, kind of looked pretty good and established himself, and then we traded him for a few prospects, and then he kind of
got a good deal for Healy.
Yeah, and then, okay, so that's kind of what I felt about Noisy. Like, we flipped into the Dodgers, and then he kind of flamed out and wasn't anything. But I feel like if he could come back and establish himself, he could be another guy in this lineup who hits in the top half and a guy who I would be excited about going forward.
Absolutely. And he's going to probably be our starting third baseman to start the year. So definitely going to get a lot of reps there. Definitely going to could be an everyday player if that's really the only third baseman we have. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. We only got a few minutes left, Jake. I know we've been going for a while. This was obviously a special episode with a lot to talk about. We had to unpack all of this. Let's talk about some record predictions, and then we'll talk about the Philly series just for a little bit, just like how you think we're going to start the season. Just for a quick record, I'm thinking we're going to be under 500. I'm hoping we can stay above 70 wins, maybe 70. I think a good goal to get for this year is 80 wins. I think that's if you can be right at the 500 line, just a bit under. I know that's a lot, but I think that's a good goal for a team that's looking to rebuild. It gives you some hope with this young talent. I think that's a good goal to get. I'm not expecting that. I think our floor would probably be like 65. Ceiling would be 85. So you're probably looking at about 75 wins.
I wrote down 70 wins on my sheet, and I mean 80 sounds tough, and I kind of grimaced when you said that, Nate, when you said 500. But I mean, looking at because I mean what it comes down to is it begins with the rotation. Like, you've got Montes, you've got Irvin, you've got Jeffries, Caprelli, and Blackburn. Those are guys who I know can pitch, and I think that it isn't that crazy out of the question, especially knowing that we've got guys like Kemp, we've got Lowry, we've got Murphy. We've got guys in the lineup who we know can hit, we know can go out there and score some runs. And I think like these pitchers who are kind of flying under the radar. I mean, do you remember like Cole Irvin reminds me so much of how Chris Bassett was right when he came up, where it was like kind of a who is this guy? But then like you're like, hey, he's pretty good, but no one really cares. And then people started caring and noticing when he started pitching really well over the last few years. I think you could see the same thing with Cole Irvin, where he's a strike thrower. Like, he just wants it. He's going to have you put the ball in play. And it's a little dangerous now. It was nice when all our fielders were top of the line last year with Chapman, Olsen, but we've got Pache in center. We've got Laureano coming back, and Pinder's a pretty solid fielder. Still got Murphy behind the dish. So, I mean, I still think that 70 is probably my expectation, just because if you start creeping closer to that 500 line, it gets tough. And especially with injuries, our team is so thin to begin with that a little bit out of expectations.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, to say the least. Should be a rebuilding season. Might not be the best, but we'll see what happens. And I just want to say final words. I just want to talk about the Philly series really quickly, and more importantly, this entire road trip. We open it with Philadelphia, Toronto, and Tampa Bay, with opening day being on the 7th. And I believe our starting pitcher that day is, or is it the 8th? It might be the 8th for us. I'm trying to find it. I think it. Yeah, no, it's the 8th, and it's Frankie Montas against Aaron Nola in Philadelphia. I definitely think I want to talk about the road trip in general, because I definitely think we have a lot to see from this A's team. So I'm not necessarily sure how it's going to go. We haven't named the starter for game 2 or game 3 yet, but overall, I definitely think if you can get at least, I mean, you're on the road. I would say if you can get, it's going to be what is it 9? I think it's like a 10-game road trip. If you can win at least 4 of those, I think that's a good trip to start the season, considering you're playing 2 teams that one was the best team in the AL last year. One barely missed the playoffs, and the other was in a dogfight for the NL East until the Braves really took off. So these are 3 really good teams that you're playing. I think you can get 4 wins from this trip. That would be a good start to the year.
Yeah, you mentioned they haven't named starters, but if you look at the Giants series that they're playing today and tomorrow, it goes Irvin and then Jeffries. So if you're doing the 5-man rotation, 5 days rest, I would expect those guys to follow Montes in that order. So it would be Montes, Irvin, Jeffries to start off the year, and then, like I said, like Blackburn and Brent Honeywell, AJ Puck, maybe a bullpen game. I don't know what we're gonna do with the 5th starter. But yeah, I mean, I think 4 wins is solid expectation for those 10 games. I honestly, though, I want just 1 win in each series because it's so easy when you have a young team who's trying to almost prove themselves. Expectations aren't that high, where if you get on a big losing streak, you just kind of accept it and let it wash over you, and then you get that losing mentality, and that's what they need to prevent. I want to see them fight every game. I want to see it be competitive. Like even if we win 1 game against the Phillies and then the other 2 games aren't 10-run blowouts, and then like the Rays, like you said, like the Rays win a lot of games, but they win a lot of close games, right? Like they're not it's a dogfight every time. So I mean, you could see even a couple of those go our way, and I'm just so excited for the season to start.
Me too, man. I mean, Friday can't come any quicker, so I'm looking forward to it. This was a very long segment. I appreciate you guys all for staying tuned. We got a lot more to come up. Segment 2 is next, talking about the national championship that just happened. We're recording this segment before it happened, but we're going to talk about the results, everything. Kansas, UNC with Zach Kopelman. You will not want to miss it. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Segment 2 on episode 10 of the Corcoran Cap. Moving from a very, very long baseball segment to your normal 15-minute March Madness segment. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran. Zach Kopelman with me, as always. And Zach, what a way to end the tournament, man. I know you were kind of pulling for UNC. We were watching the game last night, but you have to admit, that was a fantastic end to the tournament.
Yeah, really, really good game. Well played by both teams. Had a good time watching that game.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic time watching it in that very room where Zach has that background in. But let's just break down the game because I thought their national championship is one of the few sporting events I feel like is always good every year. I never really feel disappointing in that. And this year was no different. But the first half, it kind of looked like this game could get away. But the second half, Kansas came back. And really the first half, I think you really saw it. Kansas. I think the one issue you obviously had that big scoring drought from Kansas. What was the run like? I mean, it was like 22-22.
I forgot the run, but I know UNC. I think it was up 16 at a point, or maybe at half. Biggest comeback of all time in the tournament, or in the finale. So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, exactly. UNC. If I look at the play-by-play right now, I believe it was 22-22. After that, UNC finished the half up 40-25. So just an unbelievable run for UNC and a terrible Kansas drought. That was in the final 6 minutes of the first half. You had Manic with a few 3-pointers, RJ Davis, Baycott. Baycott really, I mean, it's interesting. You look at the stat sheet. Baycott had a ton of free throws, got the Jayhawks into foul trouble, and they had to adapt to that throughout the game. But in the end, I think Kansas, obviously, they avoided that foul trouble. It worked out for them. But overall, I just want to talk about that first half from UNC because I thought that was the best UNC basketball I've seen throughout this tournament, in my opinion, specifically from their bigs, Manic and Armando Baycott, and they really took over that first half.
Yeah, Manic had a couple of really big threes. I mean, Baycott was playing hurt, looked as good as always. Maybe a few moments in there where he looked a little sluggish, a little weird on the ankle on the first half. I want to hit on RJ Davis. End of the first half, had a couple of nice mid-range shots. It looked like he was really getting it going. You look at the box score, it looked like he had a really rough game. I mean, 0 for 5 from 3, 5 for 17 from the field with 15 points. But he had a really solid, I'd say a 10-minute stretch in there, 12-minute stretch at the end of the first half that it looked like everything was going for him and he was having a really good game out there. But yeah, Manic, Baycott, good end of the first half. Looked like they were really coming together.
And not to mention just the points, but the rebounds. Baycott with 15, Manic with 13, Davis with 12 to finish the game. I mean, when you rebound, it's very hard to lose a game like that. When you rebound that well, 55 rebounds compared to Kansas's 35, that's usually you're going to win those games, especially on the offensive boards. The UNC got 24 offensive rebound compared to Kansas's 8. That usually just goes to tell you that you're going to win the game. But Kansas, I mean, they made a very impressive attempt towards the end, but I think you have to give props to UNC in their rebounding. I really came down. I mean, turnovers, you had 13. Got to limit that a little bit. Some guys got in foul trouble, specifically Leaky Black getting in foul trouble. He had to play a bit softer in that second half, and I think that's where Kansas really stepped it up right there. And also, I mean, you have to give Kansas credit, and I think we can probably move on to talking about that second half because, I mean, McCormack absolutely – I mean, you saw him defend. David McCormack absolutely defended Bacot perfectly. Bacot was having a fantastic first half, even with the injury, and then the second half, McCormack held him to his own. And really, I think, well, I mean, we're going to talk about the MVP of the game and like the best player, but you have to put David McCormack in that conversation.
Yeah, McCormack did a really good job, especially in the second half. Had a couple big shots. Played Bacot well. You saw Bacot go down at the end of the game, but he was really struggling with that injury all game, and it really slowed him down in the second half where McCormack kind of picked it up. Yeah, and Leaky getting in foul trouble definitely slowed down UNC a little bit. Puff Johnson obviously came in, did a good job. We'll hit on him just a little bit. But Leaky, when he was out there, he makes such a difference, and he couldn't really because of the foul trouble. So I think that was a big reason why Kansas was allowed to get back in this game. That and McCormack's performance, you're right.
Exactly. Also, I mean, looking at the box score, only 7 guys played for UNC. There's more guys that played for Kansas, but you really saw more of Remy Martin play. But still, Remy Martin is definitely a more experienced player than Puff Johnson, and that's really why. I mean, Leaky Black is one of, if not the best defender in college basketball. I think that was a reason why Kansas was able to take over. And another reason, you have to talk about the defense. Obviously, we talked about McCormack holding Bacot to his own. DeJuan Harris Jr. also did a phenomenal job defending Caleb Love and RJ Davis. I definitely think you have to credit him a little bit. Obviously, their guard did not score many points on offense, only 2 points. That's a pretty big dud for him, but he had played some phenomenal defense with 3 steals, a block, 3 assists. He didn't have his best game. Obviously, turned the ball over 4 times. You never want that to happen. But on defense, he stood out for Kansas, and he was a big reason why they won the game. It was really a big team effort for Kansas, and that's where you see in most national championships every year. It's not just one player carrying the team. Even with, I know everyone remembers, I'll just give an example. We usually talk about Syracuse on this, and when they won in 2003, everyone talks about Carmelo Anthony. No one talks about Hakeem Worksblock. No one talks about Jerry McNamara being a number 2 guy. It was really all Carmelo Anthony out there going forward, and that's all the talk. But it's a team effort, and especially in college basketball, you don't see that you don't see one guy carry a team that often. It's always a team effort.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I think it's hard to pick out an MVP of this game. I mean, if we're being real, I'd say Caleb Love kind of handed this game to Kansas, but that's just me being a little critical.
Oh yeah, you guys should have seen Zach's reaction whenever Caleb Love shot the ball. He knew it was not going in. Then you just saw like his soul leave his body, everything.
I mean, shooting how he did 5 for 24. You know, we don't need to get into that, but we can move into this. If I really had to choose an MVP from this game, I'm going to say it's Remy Martin, who came off the bench. You know, he spent years at Arizona State. It's a little point guard who could, and came off the bench, had a big block on Caleb Love actually on a shot he was going to make that could have been a little game changing. Had a couple big shots. 14 points coming off the bench, in just 21 minutes. That was irreplaceable. I mean, I think they took Braun out for him for a little. I mean, or Harris out for him for a little bit. He was playing better than Harris, I think. Harris did a good job defending Caleb Love, but if Martin didn't play, they wouldn't have won that game.
Oh yeah, totally. I think you needed that offensive performance from Remy Martin. Obviously, DeJuan Harris, not the best offensive performance used for defense. When they got that roll going, they really got it going when Remy Martin was in the game. So you definitely saw the difference with Remy Martin, and he's definitely in the consideration for MVP. I almost picked him, but I'm going to go something a bit different than you, Zach, just to keep the formalities there. I'm going to stick to McCormack. I know I talked about him earlier, but Bacot, in my opinion, is the most valuable player on that UNC team. It's a very deep starting 5. They really got talent at all those positions, whereas Kansas, I think, is a little less deep, but you also had Agbaji, who struggled a bit throughout the game, and McCormack picked him up on defense. I also want to give a huge shout out to Christian Braun, 6 for 14, 12 rebounds, 12 points. That's a pretty solid performance as well. Or Christian Brown, I don't know why I said Braun, but Christian Brown right there. he had, I mean, the whole Kansas team, it was really a team effort. It's hard to pick one guy, as you said, Zach, but if I had to go with a guy, I would probably go McCormick just for that defense, because that's what really started turning the tide, was their defensive performance. I think they did play well in offense. Obviously, 47 points in the half is very hard to do, especially against a very good defensive team in UNC. But in the end, they held them to what, like 29 points? Still, that's pretty damn good if you ask me. And I think I'm going to take the defense. Also, McCormick, 15 points as well. Tied for leading the team in scoring. So cannot really complain there. An overall fantastic game for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you did mention Albaji, and he had his struggles, but the guy's going to be a late lottery pick. And for however much you think he struggled, I mean, I remember him very vividly having a really nice finish down the stretch. He still had 12 points, shot 4 for 9, which, is pretty respectable. So, every player on this team came to play in their own way. Maybe except for Lightfoot, who had his 3 fouls.
Yeah, no, Lightfoot had 4 fouls, didn't really do much.
But the 5 starters and Mong, really any one of them you can consider your MVP of this game. They all really brought something in, and they were cohesive in the second half, and that's what makes a national championship team, and that's why they won last night.
Exactly, just really all coming together, seeing that. And Abaji, I know we didn't talk about him, but he won most due to his unreal performance against Villanova. So they wouldn't have even made this game if it weren't for Agbaji. So you have to give him some credit. Maybe not as much for this game. Obviously, he struggled a little bit, but he is probably the main reason why they made this game. Obviously, it's a team effort, as I keep saying, but Abaji was a huge part of that team effort. Yep. And speaking of best players, obviously, Agbaji, we just did MVP for the game. We just did MVP for the Final Four. Now let's do MVP for the tournament. I'm going to start this off, and I'm going to go with someone on that UNC team who I think had a very good tournament, Armando Bacot. When you're an 8 seed and you make the national championship, that rarely happens. I know we saw it with Kentucky in 2014. Villanova won it all in 85 as an 8 seed. I don't know how many other times it's happened, but you need that. It's very tough to do. And Armando Bacot really was a key contributor. This UNC team usually just plays all their starting 5, and I think Bacot was probably the most valuable guy out of that starting 5. A double-double machine. I know that's not that big when it comes to NBA terms, but in college basketball, if you can get double-doubles on the daily, you are a top player in college basketball, and Armando Bacot showed it throughout this tournament. So I would give Armando Bacot player of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a curveball here. And it's just because one performance really sticks out to me, but Casey Ndefo of St. Peter's played incredibly defensively the entire tournament. I remember him in that Purdue game. I think the main reason they won is his defense in that game. St. Peter's as a whole played team basketball. They played incredible perimeter defense, and he is, I think, the main engine of that. So he's my MVP of the tournament. I respect Bacot. I respect Albaji. Obviously, all your star players who are going to be lottery picks pretty soon, except for maybe Matherin. Arizona should have won this tournament, whatever. But yeah. I'm gonna go with the curveball there and say Ndefo of St. Peter's.
Interesting to say that. I mean, St. Peter's obviously an unreal run, and it's definitely interesting you pick a guy like him to win this. I know they made I think my one thing about that is they made the Elite 8, but I can totally see why someone make an argument for him to win best player. I mean, they wouldn't have done it without it.
Yeah, I mean, making the Elite 8 as a 15 seed, obviously unprecedented, and I think he is an enormous factor of that. I think in such an unprecedented run like that, I'd picking the player that I think that made the most impact in that run. They made the most impressive run, in my opinion. They didn't obviously make the Final Four or the national championship or whatnot, but
there was no
they
chance
were still
of
a
doing
15
that.
seed. Still a 15 seed. You got to keep that in mind. So I think he was the best player in the tournament, in my mind. Even if he wasn't the best, he was the player of the tournament.
There you go. I love that analogy right there. That's definitely a good one right there. But speaking of good moments in the tournament, that leads us to our next and final topic, the best moment of the tournament. And for me, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious. No one expected St. Peter's to make the Elite 8. They made it there. Unreal run. And this is what this tournament's going to be remembered for. It's not really going to be remembered for Kansas winning their 4th national championship, Bill Self getting number 2. It's not going to be remembered for UNC's run and Armando Bacot having the tournament of his life, or Agbaji for that matter. It's going to be remembered for St. Peter's and how they made the Elite 8 after beating guys like teams like Kentucky, who I had in the national championship. You beat Murray State, one of the most underrated teams in the tournament, one of the most gritty teams in the tournament. And then to beat Purdue on top of that, Jaden Ivey, top 5 pick. Definitely one of the most unreal runs you will ever see in March Madness. And I don't think that I don't think that'll happen ever again.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree with you on the UNC point, because my moment of the tournament was UNC beating Duke, proving me wrong, obviously. I have a soft spot for UNC, growing up a UNC fan, but they've never matched up in the tournament. And they met in Coach K's last game in the Final Four. Coach K finished his record against UNC at 500. I mean, that's such a special moment, especially for Hubert Davis and the players on that team that get to beat Coach K in his last game and in his last game in Cameron. I mean, it really hits home for me specifically. I'm sure it definitely hits home for Duke fans who
100%
still grieving and rolling.
They're going to be grieving
for
the next 10 years over that plus.
But that would be my moment of the tournament. Obviously, St. Peter's has a spot in my heart too, being from New Jersey. The little gritty team from Jersey City. I love them, but UNC beating Duke is my moment of the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing this tournament's going to be remembered for, is that game. It was the second most watched NCAA tournament game of all time, I believe, behind the Wisconsin-Kentucky game for 2015. Kind of surprising me with that stat right there, but still, I mean, just an unreal tournament. I mean, everyone said it was destiny. It was destiny that these two teams were going to meet. They did, and Coach K got the bad end of that, and UNC makes the national championship, ultimately losing to Kansas, but a fantastic, fantastic way to cap off this tournament. Well, coming up, Joel and I are going to look at what the playoffs could look like for the Warriors, preview their final games, recap their last few games. You guys will not want to miss out. Stay tuned. Welcome back to segment 3 of episode 10 of the Corcoran Cap, moving from college basketball to the NBA, talking about the Golden State Warriors. I am your host, Sam Corcoran. To my right, as always, is Mr. Joel Pettit. Joel, we only got three more games left. How you feeling about that?
Good. I'm excited to be back in the playoffs. Obviously, the last 2 years, the Warriors have not been a playoff team. So now that we've basically clinched we have clinched our spot out of the play-in tournament. So I'm looking forward to it. And I'm really looking forward to this week's game against the Lakers, because if things line up, we could possibly eliminate postseason chances for them, which that makes me extremely happy.
Yeah, exactly. We have 3 games coming up: Lakers, Pelicans, and the San Antonio Lakers, Spurs, Pelicans. Our last home game comes on Thursday. Then you got Spurs, Pelicans. Joel, when was the last time you saw the season end on a Sunday? That's weird. It's always been like a Wednesday or a Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't feel like it usually ends on a weekend. I feel like it usually ends in the middle of the week, so they can then. Yeah, that seems a little weird.
It is, but anyways, you know what? That's what's going on this year. Well, we're a playoff team now. Or what we'll probably win the first round. We'll talk about that later. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, obviously. But first, let's just recap the games this week. We went 2-1, lost to Phoenix, 107-103. And I just want to start with that game. That was a very valiant performance from the Warriors. Jordan Poole with almost 40 points. What an unbelievable game from him, and 9 rebounds for that matter, too. Draymond all across the board had a phenomenal game as well. I mean, it's Phoenix is one of the best teams. They are the best team in basketball. They're going to finish as the best team in basketball. I'm very proud with how this team performed against them. And overall, what I take away from it is that this team can go up against any team and put up a valiant effort. And with Steph there, I think they would have won that game.
Yeah, I like to see that even without Steph that we stayed in the game. And it's a good sign. I mean, we led after the first quarter. And then basically from then on, Phoenix outscored us by 5 points in the second. We tied in the third and by 2. So basically, outside of the first and third quarter, you were a net negative of 7 points against the best team in the NBA without your by far and away best player. That it was definitely an inspiring, even though it was a loss. it was much better than these other games. Like, and we'll talk about this in the next games coming. We got off to a pretty good start. We didn't let Phoenix build a multiple possession lead early, and then we didn't have to exert extra effort to get back in the game. We hung with them the whole time, which was really good to see.
Exactly. And I think I just loved them hanging in there. And that kind of replicated to the other performances, a 111-107 win against Utah and a 109-90 win against Sacramento. And I think for the Utah game, I mean, you really saw guys stand out. I mean, the guards, Poole, Clay, I mean, just what a week from Jordan Poole. 38.
Yeah, not even a week. It's what a stretch. I mean, over the last, I think he's had 20 points in the last, like, set 20 plus and like
38, 31, 22 this week.
Yeah, and this week, and then I didn't give him enough love during our last segment. He's been on a tear for the last, like, almost quarter of a season. We're approaching 20 games now of him. I don't know if it's going to get to 20 with how many, but his streak of 20 plus points, it's consistent. It's not a flash in the pan.
Oh yeah, no, it's been really good. And he could be our starting shoe guard for the future to come. Obviously you have Clay. I don't want to disrespect Clay. But Jordan Poole has been playing out of his mind lately, and he is a young player that's going to get some reps on this team going forward. I mean, he's looking damn good out there, and I just love to see it. And then, yeah, Sacramento obviously played well. I mean, he kind of led the team against Sacramento. Not the best performance overall on paper, but Jordan Poole's stats have always stood out. I think personally for me, the best game this week has to be – it's interesting. I know I just kind of like – came down and like kind of ratted on that Sacramento game, but that was the best depth performance I think of the week for the Warriors. I think obviously against Utah, 111-107 is a good win, but you really saw the majority of those points come from Clay and Poole. The Sacramento game, you saw points all across the board. Wiggins had a lot out there. Bielitsa was back. I sent you that meme. Bielitsa looking like Larry Bird, almost with a almost with a triple double, 12 boards, 6 assists, 19 points.
Look, I give Bielitsa some crap because his mobility and defense is I'm just gonna say it's not very good. But as a passer and at his best as a floor spacer and as just a bigger body that, like, I think Draymond compliments him well because I think it's less pressure on him to be the lone guy to guard bigs. So especially
he stepped up when Draymond's been back too.
And my dad pointed it out. I totally agree. I mean, his thesis of Draymond being big for him couldn't be more accurate, and we've seen it over the last couple of games.
100%. Yeah, I definitely think Bielitsa being back. The Warriors have always done really well with the stretch four. I think Bielitsa was supposed to be that guy this year, and once Draymond's back, I mean, they complement each other really well. You've seen it a lot. I mean, this week Bielitsa, he had 5 points the first game, 19 minutes. Second game, he had 3. I mean, didn't play that many minutes because Draymond was playing a very good game. Otto Porter also got a lot of minutes in that game. But the third game, he got his opportunity with 30 minutes, 19 points, 12 boards. Led the team in rebounding. I think it was a very solid performance for him. And overall, I got to give this – I mean, this is a good week for the Warriors, I got to say.
Good week. You lose to the best team in the NBA by 4 points. You come back from a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter against Utah and just really – especially if we end up playing them in the first round, which could be a possibility – that's a huge psychological edge, I feel like, to the Warriors of, 2 weeks ago, we just whooped your guys' you-know-whats in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's going to be over Utah's team, especially a team prone to collapsing. And the Sacramento game, you showed up, and like I said with the Phoenix game, but it's sort of, you take it a step further with an inferior opponent like Sacramento. We punched them in the mouth early. We got a big lead early, and you know what? We didn't have a great third quarter. They outscored us and we turned the ball over, but we hung in the game and won and never gave up the lead because we took care of our business early. We outscored them 28-14 in the first and 34-28 in the second. We were a net 20 points in the first half. That's what you should be doing against bad teams. That's what we had not been doing against inferior opponents throughout most of March.
Exactly. It's been a very good stretch for the Warriors. I think. And this is something I noticed. It's kind of slow to make the adjustments without Steph Curry. And when Curry's been hurt in the past, it's always been tough to make. But now, I mean, 2019, 2020 was a different story. Obviously, that we didn't really adjust. We kind of just were flat that year. It wasn't really a deep team. I mean, who was the guy that we started? Like Kai Bowman or something? Was that who it was?
It was a tanking year. The lineup fluctuated. I know that it was a lot of. It was I mean. Well, Russell
I'm looking at this
stuff
up right now. Lineup. There's probably like some image of like one of the worst lineups of all time. I mean, you had the one of the lineups was Kai Bowman, Jordan Poole, a pretty bad Jordan Poole at the time too.
Poole as a rookie was rough.
Ooh, he was atrocious. This is my favorite. The November 2nd starting lineup for the Warriors, like towards the beginning of the year. I mean, there's two I want to bring up. But this one's worse. Kai Bowman at point guard, Jordan Poole at shooting guard, Glenn Robinson III at small forward. Remember him,
GR3. GR3.
Yeah.
He was. I did not love GR3.
Former dunk contest winner Eric Pascal at the 4. I like Pascal that year.
Pascanimal. He rookie sensation, but proved to not really be a winning player the next year.
And then our starting center that year was Willie Cauley-Stein.
Willie Cauley-Stein. Yes. Mr. Face Tats.
And you even you had D'Lo that year. You had a ton of guys that year, but obviously they just could not get it going. It was never the best lineup for the Warriors. Sometimes you were starting Michael Mulder starting. You obviously like Marquise Chris, so I'm not going to talk about him.
My boy Marquise Chris. I don't want to hear anything bad about Marquise Chris. I want to hear nothing bad about Marquise Chris.
Yep, never want to do that. But anyways, I mean, that was an interesting year. But we're past that. We're back in the playoffs, and the last time we were in the playoffs was 2019. We are back in the playoffs. Let's just jump right into that because Joel, I'm so excited for this, and I bet you are too. I know everyone's like, oh, why you have to be excited? You've already won 3 championships. It's playoff basketball. Come on, guys. If your team was in the playoffs, you would be excited.
Okay, to anyone saying that, who isn't fired up for their team to make the playoffs? Especially if you'd missed the playoffs in the previous couple of years. What kind of logic is that?
It's stupid.
The Lakers won the championship in 2020 more recently than you have. I mean, granted, Lakers have had a very upside-down season, and just it's been a train wreck. But you're telling me Lakers fans aren't, chomping at the bit to get a chance to get LeBron and AD healthy? No, every team wants to be in the playoffs. That's what you do. That's what it is. If you're gonna be like, oh, why are you so that's just stupid. It's what you dream for. It's what you pay. It's what you play for, to get a chance to win it all, to play in the postseason.
Even if you're like a tanking team, I'm sorry, something fell off my desk. But even if you're like a tanking team, you're still hoping to make the playoffs. There's that slim hope, but.
We just knocked Sacramento out. This is now 16 straight years for the Kings of not being in the playoffs. Do you know what Sacramento fans would give to have a chance of the postseason? They give a lot. So I think let's pipe down with the why are you getting so excited about making the play? Yeah, we're excited about making the playoffs. Yeah, because playoffs are the best basketball. It's when the best players play the most minutes, and we get to look forward to all the matchups. It's the best. The refs put away their whistles at the end of the games, which is the best thing ever. We don't get ticky-tack BS fouls at the end. It's great.
Exactly. And looking at the playoffs right now, I'm just going to take a look at the Western Conference standings.
Yep.
And I'll share my screen for this, actually, if you guys give me a quick second. Share my screen. Nice. Looking at the playoff standings right now, if I pull up my tab, I believe it's this one. Yes, it is that one. So looking at the Western Conference standings, this is what it looks like right now. Phoenix, Memphis, they're going to finish ahead of us. Other than that, it could be we're going to finish anywhere between the 3, 4, and 5 seed, I believe.
I think so.
Or what's the tiebreaker situation with Denver?
Denver has the tiebreaker over us, but we have the tiebreaker over Utah. So I think
Utah's not passing us. They're 4 games back, and we have 3 left.
And we have a 3-game lead on Denver. I think we're going to finish 3 or 4. I think as long as we can win one of our last 3 games, which is not unrealistic whatsoever, we should probably go 2-0, 2-1, or possibly even undefeated over our last 3. I'm not going to, knock on wood, hoping for the best, but I see us finishing probably 3 or 4 at this point.
Exactly, and I think right now you're looking at a matchup between Denver, Utah, and Minnesota. I mean, Joel, I know you've been high on Utah. What are your thoughts on playing Minnesota? That was an option. That was a possibility we did not talk about too much, I remember.
See, Minnesota scares me, honestly, a little more than Utah, and the reason is that I don't think we have a great answer for Karl Anthony Towns, and he's been playing really, really well lately. They've got a lot of playmakers. They've got Beverly. He's not fun to play in the playoffs. They've got Anthony Edwards. He's tough to cover one-on-one off the bounce. They've got just talent. They've got D'Angelo Russell. They've got Malik Beasley, who can get really hot and hit a lot of threes. But the biggest one is that they have a talented big who is a threat to score.
Exactly.
And will impose will.
Exactly. I want to talk about that real quick. Just from a basketball standpoint, it's interesting to see the NBA shifting again. We thought it was like you need a good guard to lead a team, but look at some of the best teams in basketball. Denver has a big that can score. Minnesota has a big that can score. Phoenix has a big that can score. Memphis, Jaren Jackson Jr. can score. Even looking at the Eastern Conference, Bam Adebayo can score. I mean, Joel Embiid, obviously, duh. Nikola Vucevic as well. I mean, it's becoming a game where
Giannis, who is arguably the best player in the league, is effectively a center.
Exactly. It's interesting to see. It's interesting to see the transition. But overall, I like the Warriors' chances in the first round. I think we can probably get out of that first round if we play a team like Minnesota, Utah. Denver's going to be a bit tougher, in my opinion, so I would preferably avoid them. Not because of the altitude. I just think they are a lot better. I think they're definitely the most challenging team. And I think even if it was like a 7-game series in where all the games are in Golden State, I definitely think that would still be really hard for the Warriors to win.
I think strictly just based off Jokic, it's that we've seen it time and time again when we played them this year. Jokic just dismantles us like he does with most teams, but unlike most teams, we're a lot smaller. Kevon Looney is our really only true center, and it's asking way too much of Draymond to have to guard Jokic, 50, 60% of possessions. So that's just, worst case scenario in the first round, having to play Jokic. I mean, Jokic is, in my opinion, if we're counting Giannis as a forward, Jokic is the best center in the NBA. And seeing as we're a small team, that is not who you want to play in the first round.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think you want Utah, you want Minnesota. I would go Utah 1, Minnesota 2, and Denver 3.
I would agree, and because I don't think it really matches up where we could somehow play Dallas. So yeah, but I think those are the only 3 you really have to consider for the first round.
Exactly. 3 more games for the Warriors. Gonna be an interesting 3 games. See where we end up, and then Joel on to the playoffs. Gonna be a fun ride for the next month. Coming up, the final segment of the episode, segment 4. It's April in the NFL, and you know what that means? Draft time. The NFL draft is coming around the corner. Rohit and I are going to talk about some positions to look at. You will not want to miss out. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final segment 4 of episode 10 of the Corcoran Cap, talking about the San Francisco 49ers. I am your host, Sam Corcoran, joined as always by Rohit Kannan to my right. And Rohit, it's April, and you know what that means? It's time for the NFL draft. How you feeling about that?
I'm excited. I mean, it's the time of year that it's the most exciting in the offseason, and happy to just be a part of it and talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always love the draft. This time of year is some of my favorite with all the draft rumors, everything going around. It's always very fun to follow. And just looking at some names too, it's always fun to do that. Now, this year, I haven't been as invested in the draft as I have been in the past, considering our pick isn't that high. But there's definitely a ton of guys we need to talk about. And so what Rohit and I are going to do is we're going to rank some positions that we need the most and that we think the 49ers and the guys that the 49ers could get. So I say let's kick it off. Do you want to go from 1 to 5 or 5 to 1? I have 5 positions I wanted to talk about. Which one do you want to start with?
I'd say we can go from 1 to 5, but first and foremost, I just want to let everybody know where we're picking so far, barring any other trades.
Yeah, so how about you do that? That's a great idea.
So we have a second round pick, number 61 overall. 2 third-round picks. One of them is our own, 93 overall. The other one is a comp pick, 105. We have a 4th at 134, a 5th at 172, 3 sixths, 187, 220, and 221, and then a 7th at 262. So no first-rounder, and we're not going to have a first-round next pick either, because if y'all remember, those are the picks we used to trade up last year for Trey Lance. So if anyone's wondering where the 49ers have lost their first rounder, they gave that pick to Miami for Trey Lance. But picking pretty much at the end of each round is going to be interesting. But given the amount of late round picks, we might see the 49ers trade up either really late into the first or back into the second or third to pick another guy.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about, there's one position we're going to talk about last that I think needs to be addressed. You have to keep in mind, We do not have a first round pick. Our first pick is in the 60s. So just keep that in mind while we're talking about these guys, because we're really going to be talking about guys that we can that we can get at our position where we're at. And I think let's just kick it off, starting with position number 1 that I think we need the most, in my opinion, is edge. And obviously we can go back and forth, Rohit, about what we think the position is. So I can say my side, then I'll let you get to your position after. But I think edge is the most important position. I think you need a guy to pair up next to Nick Bosa. As much as I like the Kerry Hyder signing, as much as I like the Jordan Willis signing, those guys are meant to be depth pieces. I don't really see those guys being starters. You have Armstead as well, who can play at edge, but honestly, he can play defensive tackle sometime. And, the 49ers have thrived off of edge depth now. And I think they need a bit more at edge, especially with no D Ford coming back. So a few guys I want to mention. I have 3 guys listed right here. One guy I think is going to go a bit higher than 61, but you never know what happens. Drake Jackson did not have a pro day, which means he could fall, did not participate in the combine, I believe, as well. There was a report the other day that he met with 13 teams. So, a lot of guys could be a lot of teams could be interested in him. But, there's always a chance he falls to 61, especially if there are guys who are not, especially if there are teams who, especially if he was injured, I should say. Speaking of injury, number 2, and this guy, if he falls to us, you have to take him. David Ajabo of Michigan, supposed to be a top 10 pick, tore his Achilles at his pro day. Yes, you're going to have to wait him out, but he is a special talent. I will tell you that right now. He is one of the guys that I have watched a lot of, just highlights and stuff. He has been phenomenal for Michigan, and he was phenomenal at the University of Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. I think he would be a fantastic pick for the 49ers. If you can somehow get him at 61, then I really think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I highly doubt that happens. 2 other guys I want to talk about, Maijai Sanders, I think that's pronounced his name. He is the Cincinnati edge, obviously had a phenomenal season at Cincinnati, making it to the college football playoff. And I definitely think that he can make an impact immediately for the San Francisco 49ers. Last guy I want to talk about is Dominique Robinson out of Miami, Ohio. This guy we had a meeting with, so you never know. You could get some interest in him. But it's very interesting, Rohit. This is a very deep edge class. The first 2 picks could be edge. After that, there's a ton of edges that could go in the top 10. I can see 4 edges going in the top 10. Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis, and Trayvon Walker of Georgia. I definitely think you can see a lot of edge going deeper. There could be some edges that fall. So you never know what happens. It's a deep edge class, and I think the 49ers can get a special talent at edge.
Yeah, I agree with you that our priority should be edge, because this team, and I've said it in previous episodes, and if you follow me on Twitter, I've talked about it a lot. This team has been built from the trenches. This team is built on the offensive and defensive line. On the defensive side, we're talking about the edge rusher and the defensive tackles, and we got a premier edge rusher in 2019 with Nick Bosa. But since 2019, since drafting Nick Bosa, we have struggled to find a proper complement piece. We tried D Ford, couldn't stay on the field, couldn't stay healthy. We tried Kerry Hyder, but Bosa wasn't on the other side. He tore his ACL in week 2 in 2020. Then we tried a mixture of Arden Key and a couple other guys in 2021 whose names I'm just not really coming off the top of my head right now. But nobody's really sticking around as a proper complementary piece to Nick Bosa on the opposite edge. So
it's all diamond in the rough signings.
Yeah, it's all been diamond in the rough signings, but nobody's really sticking around. Either not even for a second contract because they perform well enough to the point where the 49ers get priced out, or they're just not on a long-term enough deal. But the interesting part about why this is such a deep edge class, we might be able to get some first-round talents even in the second round. And like I said earlier,
exactly,
we have plenty of picks in the back end, meaning it is not out of the realm of possibility that we trade up into the late first, early second. And I think that might be like a concept or a idea that might be thrown around a bit.
Yeah, totally. And I definitely think you saw last year, it was a very deep O-line class, a very deep wide receiver class, and you saw guys falling to the second round. I think Sam Cosmi, I had as a first round pick, went like early 50s. That's just one example. So the O-line deal was, whatever the deepest position is, guys fall. And people should be ready for that, for guys to fall. So You never know about edge right there.
Yeah, but if there's two names I'm really keeping an eye on is, first of all, it's South Carolina's Kingsley Enagbare. I'm sorry if I butchered his name. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with names, but he has been like, if you watch the guy play at South Carolina, he is impressive.
Oh, he is.
Very sound technique, really strong. I mean, put him. And the funny thing is, guess what? We have one of his former teammates already on the roster in Javon Kinlaw. On
the D line.
Yeah, so technically there's some familiarity there. Plus we have him alongside Bosa, so that could be pretty scary for years to come. And again, deep edge class. I could see Enagbare even being a third round pick just because of how deep this class is. It's insane.
Yeah, totally. It's a very deep class, and I think you're gonna get a guy at 61 and maybe even later who's gonna fall right into your lap. So I think it's gonna work out really well. I want to save some time and kind of get moving on everything. We only have 15 minutes here, and we've talked a lot about edge. That's how deep this edge class is. So I'm going to talk about another position real quick, safety. I know we haven't figured out what the Tart situation is. Tyrann Mathieu still a free agent. I think we could make a move in free agency, but if not, that should be the top priority in my opinion. I think we'll sign someone, but always keep an eye out for safety. Leon O'Neal Jr. is the one guy I wanted to talk about. I know a lot of Niners fans have been hyping him up. I want to look more into him before I'm totally sold on him, but that's just one guy I want to bring up at safety who could fall into our laps. Everyone's saying he could start day one, so got to keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, I mean, another guy I've been keeping tabs on is Kirby Joseph from Illinois, but I'm not sure if he'd be able to fall to us at 61 if we even use 61 on a safety. But again, with how deep some of the positions are in this draft class, you may be able to see runs at positions that you wouldn't expect to see runs in. But at the same time, that also creates a risk of, because I'm going to be honest, this safety class and this O-line class are both pretty shallow. So you might see guys like who aren't as talented go pretty early just for the sake of need. And I think Joseph might be in that category of he's going to go a bit earlier because of need, but I would not be opposed to trading up for him. He's a ball hawk. Totally. He's got really long arms. So,
Yeah, you could totally see the Niners trade up for his safety. Last time they did it, they got a pretty solid safety in Eric Reed, made a Pro Bowl, so you never know. Something could happen. Trying to breeze through this. Let's move to the offensive side now. I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball at you, Rohit. Running back. What do you think about running back?
Oh, I was expecting this.
You were expecting it.
You want Shanahan to find his guy.
Yeah, and I definitely think with Trey Lance now, I definitely think you can get a running back. And by the way, this is a somewhat weak running back class. So some guys could go higher than usual, but you never know. Some guys, the first running back should be going in the second round. You have Breece Hall of Iowa State, Kenneth Walker, a Heisman favorite throughout the year out of Michigan State, could fall right into our laps, kind of in that range. Also, let's talk about, Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in football. How about his brother, James Cook?
I mean,
there's a lot of guys you could go after.
I'm going to attest to James Cook's talent and abilities, and James Cook is damn good out of the backfield in terms as a receiver.
That too. Hold on. I want to interrupt you right there. That is a key point. Guys who can receive the ball at running back too, Shanahan will be all over them.
Here's the thing. If y'all want to see a masterclass in running back receiving at the collegiate level, look at James Cook in the what was it, the Citrus Bowl that they played in against Michigan? I forget what name the bowl game was. I want to say it was the Citrus Bowl. And then obviously the national championship against Alabama. Just watch those two games. Watch James Cook out of the backfield. You will be impressed. Trust me.
Yeah, absolutely. Shameless plug real quick. If you really want to get an undrafted guy, look at Chris Elmore out of Syracuse. Possibly can make the roster. Good at pass catching, fullback. Behind Juszczyk. Probably won't make the roster, but hey, it would be nice to have a Syracuse player on the 49ers. But anyways, that probably won't happen. That's just in my dreams. I would just love to see a Syracuse player in a 49ers uniform. Probably none are going to get drafted this year, but you never say never, man. Cody Roscoe could go higher, but he probably is not. He's a 3-4 guy, so you probably won't see him in a Niners uniform. But anyways, speaking of the defensive line, let's move on to defensive tackle. And this is one position I'm going to be completely honest, I have not done much research on. But Rohit, would you agree with me that 3 tech guys are guys to look at right here for the 49ers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We definitely need another 3 tech guy for, if nothing else, just more depth. Because here's the thing. We've seen the practice videos of Javon Kinlaw now. Yes, he is moving so much better in comparison to last season, but you have to think the injury is still a concern. And the injury history is still a concern. You need someone to be behind Kinlaw. And you might need a guy behind Armstead because we can't just keep having Armstead out there for every single snap. He's going to get gassed.
Oh, yeah, totally. He is. And I'll just name some guys who we could get. You're probably looking maybe 3rd round. I think I don't think it's as big as a need as other positions that we had. But Haskell Garrett out of Ohio State, Thomas Booker from Stanford, Jaden Peavy out of A&M, who played next to DeMarvin Leal, could be a good guy right there. Also, you want to get a small school guy, look at Eric Johnson out of Missouri State. I've heard great things about this guy. Could be a sleeper, maybe round 4, round 5, something around there. Sleeper pick right there. Watch out for him.
Yeah, that could be an interesting thing. But again, we're very early in the draft process. We're still working through names. We're still working through highlights and stuff like that. But it's just some things to talk about. But me personally, especially with defensive tackle, I'd like to get a veteran from the open market right now for vet min. I mean, sure, we can still bring in a guy, but it honestly would not hurt at all. Not only for depth, but still having that veteran presence alongside Armstead.
Oh, yeah.
Just to help that young defensive line room.
It's a young defensive tackle room, too. That's one thing you have to keep in though. I think a veteran would be a good idea. Obviously, we got Hassan Ridgeway from the Philadelphia Eagles. That could be a good veteran to have. But I think you might want to go with someone more experienced. I don't know who's on the market. I'll have to look at that. But obviously, you can't go wrong with the draft pick either.
Yep.
So I definitely think right now we're almost out of time. Rohit, are there any positions that you want to talk about that we haven't got to talk about so far?
I mean, there's one position everybody wants to talk about. It's like, do the 49ers go for a wide receiver? I personally think it's ill-advised. I agree. Because why would we? Because here's the thing. We do not have a first-round pick. I want to reiterate that as much as I can. Yes, this is a pretty deep wide receiver class. Yes, we could probably get talent in the later rounds. But at the same time, do we truly want to pay a premium price in the draft for who would be at best a wide receiver 3 in a wide receiver room that's already
probably
very,
a wide
young.
Receiver 4 when you have Jawan Jennings on your team as well?
Oh, right.
You could have a wide receiver 4, and this is why I completely agree with you. Maybe even a wide receiver 5, depending on what they're going to do with Ray McLeod. Right now, look, on the roster, we have Brandon Ayuk, Travis Benjamin, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod. Those are 5 guys. I mean, Benjamin's probably not much. Even Kittle you have there as well. He could do well. The roster is not updated, but still, I know a lot of people, and I just want to say this one time. I know people want Christian Watson. It's not happening. I'm telling you right off the bat, it is not happening. No way it's happening. I like Christian Watson, but guess what? He's going to be a first-round pick, and there's nothing you can do about it. So everyone, you need to stop dreaming about that. If you want to dream about one guy, dream about Justin Ross. This guy could have entered the draft last year. I know Jake and I watched a ton of film. Justin Ross is one of our favorite receivers to watch. And he had a down year with Clemson this year. Clemson did not really have a good year, but coming off an injury, you could get him maybe round 2, round 3. I think that would be a phenomenal addition to this wide receiver room. You're probably looking at a day 2, day 3 pick, or round 3 or day 3 pick if you want a receiver on this team. I think we will take a receiver, but it's not going to be in the early rounds.
Yeah, no, same. And honestly, shameless plug here for the day 3 pick. I mean, Slade Bolden from Alabama. I mean, good route running, kind of shaky hands, but he knows how to get open. And I keep watching him play, and he reminds me of Trent Taylor before the foot injury. And I'm just like, maybe there's something there. But again,
exactly, they're all
day 3 pick at the most, if that. But don't be surprised if the 49ers bring in a couple of undrafted free agents from the wide receiver position. But I do not expect them to pay a premium price in terms of draft picks.
Exactly. And one thing to keep an eye on, final word, if you want a wide receiver, look at their 3-cone time. That's what Shanahan loves to see. So you'll probably see a guy go later, but if you want to pick out a guy that they could go after, look at their 3-cone time. That's going to be all we have here on this episode of the Corcoran Cap. Rohit, as always, thank you so much for joining. It was always great to talk Niners with you. Guys, make sure to follow him on Twitter at RohitKanan71. For more Niners content, we're going to be posting a ton of draft content as well as the rest of 49ers Twitter. So it's going to be a fun month, Rohit. Can't you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Draft month is always where the rumors spice up. Gets a bit spicy in there. Love to see it. But that is going to do it for episode 10. Thank you all so much for watching. I know we had a long A segment. It's been a pretty long Niners segment compared to most. But it's going to be a fun episode to watch. I'm glad you guys all enjoyed it. And I will see you guys next week. Peace.
Peace.